Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Carl with Active English. Today I want to talk about dialects, different regional dialects in the United States and how they reflect personality types of the United States. So this is something that I get really emotional about. I think a lot of linguists, language experts are really missing the boat when it comes to understanding dialect, okay? So many linguists, so many language experts explain dialect, that is, regional subtleties, regional accents, regional slang, different ways of pronunciation. They explain this dialect in terms of technique, vocal folds, vowel production, dropped consonants, all this, long vowels. I think this is completely wrong, okay? I don't think this is how you should understand language. Language is not about technique. Language is about emotion, okay? So if you want to understand regional dialects, you have to understand regional emotions, regional feelings, the vibe, the atmosphere of that region to understand the speech patterns. I don't think you're going to get anywhere by just studying, diphthongs and dropped consonants and vowels. Language is about emotion. So I just want to borrow an analogy from the world of acting to explain my understanding of language and dialects, right? So if you study acting, you go to acting school, there are two really big schools of acting, two different theories about acting. One is called character acting, which is based more around technique, and the other one is called method acting, which is based more on psychology and emotions. So if you study character acting, you're going to break down a character into, body language, gestures, voice, mannerisms, technique, appearance. Think of Gary Oldman as Winston Churchill, for example, in The Darkest Hour, which of course was a fantastic example of character acting. But my understanding is that character actors are imitating the external features of a character, right? The body language, the sounds, how they move, how they walk, how they talk. So it's a technical understanding of acting. Whereas method acting, you're getting to the core, to the psychology, to the center, to the vibe of that character, and you're trying to inhabit that character's very persona. So, for example, Heath Ledger, right, as the Joker in the Dark Knight movie, right? So this is really inhabiting the feeling, the vibe, the personality, the core of that character. And then you're letting all of those external productions like your body language, your gestures, your intonations, your inflections come out of that vibe. You see, so it's a very different approach to imitating somebody. It's a very different approach to acting. Character acting, it's more about technique, whereas method acting is more about psychology. It's about the vibe, okay? And this is where I think a lot of linguists, that is language experts, get it wrong when they're trying to understand and explain dialect. They're taking a character acting approach to dialect. That is, they're taking a very technical approach to dialect. They're trying to explain dialect in terms of vowels and consonants and diphthongs and movements of the mouth and movements of the tongue. And that is just like imitating somebody's body language and mannerisms without understanding the psychology, the heart, the core, the vibe of that character. So I try to approach language in terms of method acting. I want you to understand the personality, the vibe, the feeling, the character, the psychology of a region and how that produces a particular dialect, okay? So I want to look at three major dialects of the United States, and I want to share how those different dialects reflect a deeper psychology or a deeper personality of those different regions of the United States. Now, some linguists will break down the dialects of the United States to between 30 to 36 regional dialects, and that's fine. But I just want to keep it simple today, and I want to look at three regional dialects. This is based on the work of William Labov, who was a very prominent sociologist in the United States, who came up with three regional dialects of the United States. The first region is called the Northern region, and this is characterized by what he called the Northern cities vowel shift. So a lot of people, for example, in Chicago, the Midwest, they may not say Saturday, they might say Saturday, or instead of like saying cat, they'll say kiat, cat. So this is defined by a chain shift, which in language really just means it's a ripple effect. It's when you move one vowel in a word, and that forces adjacent vowels to kind of adjust or adapt. So, for example, that's my cat. I see my cat sitting on the sofa instead of saying cat. You hear that? Or I'm going to go on Saturday. So you'll hear this in the Midwest, starting even in Rochester, New York, extending to Chicago. So this is the northern city's vowel shift, okay? Again, Saturday instead of Saturday. The next region is the southern region, and this is called the southern vowel shift. It's defined by turning short vowels into sort of very long, multi-part sounds while changing the long vowels. For example, instead of ride, you say ride, right? I took a ride. This is a very southern accent, southern drawl. We're going to go for a ride, okay? So that is the southern vowel shift. The third dialect, according to William Labov, this encompasses the Midwest and the West, okay? Many people think of this as like general standard American English, and this is defined by this low back vowel merger. Again, that's just a very technical aspect. What that means is certain words to me are going to sound the same. Now, I'm from the East Coast of the United States, so I would say, for example, a cot and caught. That's how I pronounce it. Cot is something you sleep on, and then like I caught a fish. Now, the third dialect would produce those sounds very similarly. For example, cot and caught, right? I'm going to sleep on a cot, and I caught a fish. Okay. Another example, Don and Dawn. All right. Now I say this Don, this is a man's name, Don, and then Dawn, the dawn. So I pronounce those very differently being from the East Coast. I say Don and then Dawn. But someone in this third dialect that is in the Midwest and the West Coast might say Don and dawn. They're producing those sounds very similarly, okay, because of the low back vowel merger, okay? So that is the third dialect, okay? So those are the three different dialects of the United States according to William Labov. And that is a very technical, very scientific approach to language, right? This would be, I believe, the character acting approach to language, where we're just looking purely at the vowel sounds, at the technique, right? The appearance, the production, how you move your mouth, how you move your tongue, right? This is like a character acting approach to dialect. And I think it's totally wrong. I think in order to understand dialect, you have to take a method acting approach to language. That is, you need to understand the psychology, the personality, the vibe, the atmosphere of the region, of the people who produce those sounds, okay? So this is really interesting to me that William Labov divided the United States into three different regional dialects because, as it happens, the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology also divided the United States into three personality regions. So I think it's really fascinating how these three different personality regions of the United States give rise to three different dialects. So I think the best way to understand the three regional dialects of the United States is not to understand the technique, but to understand the personality, the psychology, the emotions, the sort of vibe and atmosphere of those different regions, okay? So let's look at this study. This is a study of the United States from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, where they divide the United States into three different regions, okay? So they're giving you the sort of psychological centers, the atmosphere, the psychology, the vibe of the United States, of the different regions of the United States. So this is applying a method acting approach to understanding American dialect, okay? So let's have a look at each of the different regions, and then let's talk about how that regional personality is reflected in the dialect. So the first region is the Midwest. This is considered friendly and conventional, okay? So I would say the vibe, the atmosphere here is very traditional and maybe even a little bit strict or a little bit controlled. And I do think you hear this in the northern cities vowel shift, right? If I say cat instead of cat, or I say Saturday instead of Saturday, to me, this sounds very confined, very regimented, even a little bit conformist. And that does mesh, that does line up with the personality of the Midwest. It's very controlled. It's very traditional. It's very dogmatic. It's not as innovative. It's not as rebellious as the West Coast, okay? So the region of the Midwest of the United States, considered friendly and conventional, that's the personality type, and you hear that in the northern cities vowel shift, right? Saturday. I have a cat, right? This, to me, this language sounds a little bit regimented, a little bit conformist. It's not very dynamic. It's not very relaxed. It's very traditional, and you hear that in the dialect, okay? Now let's look at the West Coast of the United States. The region of the West Coast, the personality type is considered relaxed and creative, okay? So the vibe is very non-traditional. It's very innovative. It's departing from tradition. Think about all the innovation that's happening on the West Coast. In Los Angeles, you have Hollywood, you have the video game studios. In Northern California, you have Apple, you have Google, Facebook, Pixar, you have Silicon Valley. There's so much creativity and innovation in California. Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, these are the heroes on the West Coast. Whereas on the East Coast, people look more to tradition, to Paul Revere, for example, in Boston. But on the West Coast, it's more about innovation. It's more about breaking with tradition. That is the personality type of the West Coast. Innovation, departing from tradition. And I do think this comes out in the dialect of the West Coast. For example, you hear slang like dude, I'm stoked, I'm going to bail, right? This is like surfer dude language. It's very non-traditional. In the Southern California, you have the Southern California Valley Girl slang. He was like, okay, this is very non-traditional way of speaking. It's not formal. If you think about the Californians on Saturday Night Live, that skit, or think about the Big Lebowski, portrayed by Jeff Bridges. All of these characters are iconoclastic. They're breaking with tradition. They're doing their own thing. They're renegades, okay? This is the identity of the West Coast. It's very much about innovation. It's about breaking with tradition. If you think about Steve Jobs and the whole mantra, the whole spirit of Apple, think different, right? This is the vibe of the West Coast. It's about breaking with tradition. It's not controlled. It's very relaxed. It's very creative, just like the map from the Journal of Personality and Psychology, okay? And you hear this in the language, right? The language is not controlled, okay? The language is loose, it's very free, it's very relaxed. So if you want to affect the dialect of the West Coast, you have to embody this vibe of the dude from the Big Lebowski. You have to embody Reese Witherspoon's character from Legally Blonde. This is Elle Woods, right? These are people who are fiercely independent. They're breaking with tradition and they're doing things their own way. And that comes out in the dialect. It comes out in the language, okay? Which William Labov referred to as the third dialect. This is very low back vowel merger. For example, I'm going to say Don and Don just the same. I'm going to say caught and caught just the same. Nobody's going to tell me how I want to speak, okay? I'm very free. I'm very relaxed in my vowel sounds. I'm very relaxed in my slang. And I'm very relaxed in the way I talk. I'm really okay with myself, okay? I also notice on the West Coast that people talk a little bit slower. When I moved out to California, my parents actually told me that I started to speak slower because the region is more relaxed. So you hear that in the dialect. The speech pattern is a little bit slower. It's like, dude, slow down. Okay, so again, think of the Big Lebowski, Jeff Bridges, think of the Californians on Saturday Night Live. These are relaxed people. They're not concerned with tradition. Okay, so that is the West Coast. And now let's look at the East Coast personality type. According to the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, the East Coast is temperamental and uninhibited. So temperamental and uninhibited means sort of emotional and not shy. So I think the vibe, the atmosphere of the East Coast is mostly characterized by toughness. It's aggressive. It's not shy. It's uninhibited. Okay, this is the personality of New York City, Boston, Philadelphia. If you think about Rocky Balboa in Philadelphia, think about Good Will Hunting, the way people talk in Good Will Hunting in Boston. They're dropping the F-bomb. They're swearing. This is a tough guy. This is the embodiment of toughness. Think about New York City, right? You have Goodfellas. You have Robert De Niro. You have Martin Scorsese, right? This is about as tough as it gets. Think about The Devil Wears Prada, right? The way that Meryl Streep portrays that character. These are tough people, okay? This is aggressive. This is assertive. This is the East Coast of the United States where the vibe is tough. And so if you want to embody that vibe in your dialect, you have to affect a certain tough way of talking, okay? Instead of saying dog, we say dog, okay? Dog. Now, what sounds tougher? If I say dog, I have to pick up my dog or I have to pick up my dog, right? Dog. Get the dog. It sounds tough, right? Forget about it. Forget about it. That also sounds very tough. You guys, use guys, right? This sounds tough. This is a tough way of speaking, okay? So the dialect of the East Coast, it's not about vowels. It's not about consonants. It's not about diphthongs. It's about toughness. It's about Martin Scorsese. It's about Robert De Niro. I'm going to pick up my dog, okay? Forget about it, right? What do you guys think about this, Right? These are tough people, and this is how you speak. It's toughness, okay? So that's where the dialect come from, okay? again, it's not about technique, it's about emotion. So if you want to understand the 3 different dialects of the United States, you have to understand the emotion of that region. It's not about technique and vowels. This is character acting. This is just mimicking sounds without being aware of the vibe, of the atmosphere, the culture, the psychology that gave rise to that dialect. Okay, so to summarize, the Midwest of the United States, it's very traditional, it's very conventional, it's very controlled. Thus, we hear words like Saturday. I'm going to go on Saturday, okay? Saturday. Not Saturday, Saturday. To me, that sounds a little bit controlled. It sounds a little bit uptight if I say Saturday. Saturday, okay? The West Coast, this is very non-traditional. It's not controlled. Dude, relax, right? The Big Lebowski, the Californians, these are relaxed. You got to slow it down, relax, okay? And on the East Coast, it's very tough. Forget about it, okay? What are you guys doing, okay? I got to get my dog, all right? This is tough, okay? So that's how I understand the 3 different dialects of the United States. You can find so many videos on YouTube that will give you a very technical, very scientific approach to dialect in the United States. But I hope that what I've given you is more of a psychological, more of a method acting approach to understanding the different dialects of the United States. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. This is Carl with Active English. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you guys later. Bye.